As most of you probably know, I was participating in the Biblio Games readathon in June. This readathon was page-based, and you could also gain bonus points for completing challenges. I read 8 books and 2,059 pages. I also gained 200 bonus pages from the challenges that I completed. So I'm just going to go over them now. Before I start, I just want to say thank you to all my new subscribers, and if you're not subscribed yet, please consider doing it. It really makes my day, and leaving a like on this video. So the first book I read in June was Euphoria by Heinz. This was, he's a German author, and it was based in Austria. I gained 50 bonus pages for reading this book because it fulfilled the read a book with a satisfying ending challenge. So this book followed a group of men who go on a vacation to the mountains, and when they come back they discover that the apocalypse has happened. I thought this was just going to be a normal novel, you know, but it actually turned out to be more of a series of descriptions. So you never find out the narrator's name, and you don't even find out that much about him. It's more just about his friends and him watching them and them experiencing the world in this apocalypse. There's very little dialogue. You just follow the men, they walk around, they see things, they do things, and I really enjoyed this book. I thought it was really different, especially from what I was thinking it was going to be. I thought it was just going to be like a normal novel. However, I did find it hard to sympathise with the characters because they just done certain things that I think are never acceptable, and I don't want to really talk about them in a video, but even if the world is ending, I just don't think some of the actions they took were necessary. But obviously they were being driven crazy, they had no food or anything, so it doesn't make sense, but I just personally don't think you can justify it. So the next book I read was a reread, and this was Death Note Volume 1. And this is a manga that follows a teenage boy, Light Yagami, who finds a notebook, and when you write anyone's name in the notebook, they die. The notebook was dropped into the human world by a Shinigami, who is now stuck with Light until Light dies or he gives the notebook away. And he dropped in the world because he was bored and knew that the human world, basically drama would happen. This was a reread. I had read this whole series back in 2010, and I watched the anime back then as well, and I loved it just as much now as I did then. Light is such an interesting character because he truly thinks he's doing good, he's killing criminals, you know, he's going to make the world a better place. However, his morality starts to slip, especially when the police start to investigate who Kira, which is what the world starts to know the killer as, and I just think it makes for a really fascinating story. I definitely want to read the rest of this series soon because, like I said, I just love it. The art as well. Like, this is the Shinigami route. Like, I just love the art. Like, it's simplistic but detailed at the same time. I don't know. I really like it. Just need to move my script down. For the book with a badass character challenge, I read A Fever of the Blood by Oscar de Muriel. This was set in Edinburgh in Scotland in 1889 and follows 2 detectives. A Scottish one who's, you know, kind of rough, he doesn't mind getting his hands dirty. He's known for fighting locally, and he has a reluctant English partner. I didn't realise at first this is actually the second book in the series, but you don't need to read them in order. They're kind of standalone, but I do wish I read the first one first, because I think that goes over how the two met. But anyway, I still really enjoyed it. In the book, a nurse is killed in a mental hospital and a patient escapes into the night. So you think it's going to be straightforward, you think it's going to be them chasing the patient. And at first it does start like that, but you know, the story starts to unravel, more and more things start to come out, and it gets so complex, and I was just truly amazed with like the twists and turns this book took. The dynamic of the 2 detectives as well is one of the highlights of the book because it's such a stereotype, but you know, like, you have the Scottish guy who is, you know, a fighter, and then you have the English guy who just wants to follow the rules, just wants to get the case done. And if you know anything about the kind of stereotypical relationship between Scottish and English people, you can imagine it just makes for like a really interesting relationship, especially when things start to go wrong. The 2 of them, they fight, they have to get back together, they're partners. I just really enjoyed it. I definitely recommend this book. I couldn't recommend it enough. Around halfway through, I don't want to say too much about what goes on because I think it's better to experience it yourself, but around halfway through things start to go kind of crazy, and you think, like, are we going there? Like, is this going to happen? And it does go there, but in a good way, and it completely makes sense in the story and in the world of the story, and it just completely worked. I don't want to say much else about it, but definitely recommend this book. So the next book I read was the Sci-Fi Challenge, and I decided to go for a classic, and this was War of the Worlds by H.G. Wells. I read this book in one day. I absolutely loved it. If you don't know, War of the Worlds follows a man who is trying to survive an invasion by aliens in England. It was written in 1897, and I find this so interesting because it feels so modern. It feels like it could be written today, and it's just like, it's so timeless in my opinion. And when I was reading it, I kept having to remind myself that, because obviously the military come in, they're trying to stop it, everyone's going crazy, there's panic, and I just found it so interesting to think that this was before even World War One, never mind World War Two. Like, obviously so much more technology was made in World War Two to aid in the war. So 1897, none of this existed. Like, the military is not capable of fighting like these aliens, and I just found that so interesting. The main character as well is really smart. He actually makes really good decisions. He's not an idiot, you know. He survives. That's not a spoiler, but he survives, and it's because he is smart, and I really enjoyed that, because it could be so easy to have, I don't know, stupid characters get themselves killed, but this main character, he thinks things through, he makes good decisions. At one point we switched to hearing about the narrator's brother, but it's still the narrator that's telling the story, and it really gives the feeling of, this is something that happened, and this is like, in my head I was like, this is like, it could be like an old man who experienced this, obviously not 1897, he'd be dead by now, but he's sitting telling you a story. Like, I just found it fascinating. Again, it just came off like so modern, especially for a story written in that time. I definitely recommend this book, and I see myself rereading it in the future. It's kind of like a weird shadow going on in my face. I don't know, whatever. So I mentioned it many times now in book tour videos, but one of my favourite books is Alice's Adventures in Wonderland by Lewis Carroll, and a book I don't have as much feelings for is Through the Looking Glass. So this edition actually has both stories in it, and here's Through the Looking Glass, first page. It's a sequel to Alice in Wonderland, but it's not. I mean, it is a sequel, but it doesn't really follow through with like catching up on events from the first book, if that makes sense. So I decided to reread this, and although I really enjoyed it, I still think it has nothing on the original. The original is just so, like, such a classic, and I really enjoyed Through Looking Glass, but it just doesn't hold you in the same way. It's just not as interesting a story, in my opinion. But what I did really enjoy is the new characters and creatures that Lewis came up with. Lewis Carroll, I don't know why I said his first name. We're on a first name basis. Such as the insects, and there's a leg of mutton. I'll put a picture of him here. I just found him so hilarious. And when reading to myself, what did I say? When reading this book, I actually thought to myself, more than the first one, that a lot of the things Carroll say, which at first come off as so nonsensical, when you really think about them in kind of like a roundabout way, and you kind of think, okay, on surface level this doesn't make sense. When you try and think about it, a lot of the stuff he's saying does make sense, and I just thought that was really interesting. I also personally thought that Alice herself was much more likeable in Through the Looking Glass than she is in the first book, because she just kind of, in this book, goes along with the flow. She just doesn't argue back with the characters that she meets as much, which is, I think she's kind of annoying in the first one, to be honest. But yeah, I really enjoyed Through the Looking Glass, but it just doesn't hold up as much as the original. Next book I read was another kind of sequel, and this was The Alloy of Time by Brandon Sanderson. This book is set in the world of Mistborn, which, as you know, I loved. It's 300 years after the events of those books, and I really enjoyed the main character Wax, and I actually think I liked him more than Vin from Mistborn. I'll get into why in a second. The other main character, Wayne, grew on me after a while. He was kind of annoying at first, but the two of them have, again, just like A Fever of the Blood, they have such a good dynamic that it just really works. So I really enjoyed seeing how the world has progressed since the original series, and I was really surprised on the decisions that Sanderson made. For example, in this book, electricity started to come around. It's not like everywhere, but I just thought that was really interesting. It really shows that it's in the future, you know, of the world. And I thought the fighting, this was why I think I preferred Wax to Vin. I thought the fight in this book was far more interesting than the originals, because each of the characters only have a few powers each. So we see them working together and using their powers to their advantage, which I thought was far more interesting than Vin, who, when she was trained, could use every power, you know. She wasn't invincible, but I felt like it, whereas these characters are much more vulnerable. They have very obvious weaknesses, but they also have very strong powers, and they bounce off each other so well and use their powers to their advantage. One thing I didn't like about this book was that in the original, Vin is such a strong character, and she basically is the one, spoilers, but not really spoilers, who saves the world. So I thought in the future, you know, women in this world would be much more independent, you know, Vin's influence would have trickled down, but there was only one strong-ish character in this book, female character, and the rest of the time, all the women are treated as lesser than the men, you know, there's like marriage arrangements and stuff, and I was kind of disappointed in that. I thought that Vin's influence would have really, I don't know, trickled down into society. But other than that, I did really enjoy this. So the next book I read was another one by H.G. Wells, and this was because I was so impressed by War of the Worlds that I was like, I need to pick up something else by him. So this is The Time Machine. This was his first ever fictional novel, and it did not disappoint. Typically, I don't like time travel stories. I find them kind of convoluted, especially like the whole trope of like the butterfly effect. I just don't like it. I think it never works well. But this book goes into the far distant future when the world is basically about to end, and I loved Wells' description of the planet and the people, and I loved the world building. I found it really interesting, really believable, and the character who does the time travelling is a scientist, so he describes things in a scientific way, and I thought that was really interesting because the way he described things, you really believed it, you know, it seems true, it seems like real science. I also really appreciated that the time traveller, when he met the people of the future, you know, the creatures are not even humans anymore, they're like little creatures, he was curious about them, he wanted to learn their culture, you know, he wasn't scared of them, he didn't want to take advantage of them, and I really appreciated that. I thought it was really interesting. There is a lot of subtext in this book that I think personally probably went over my head, but I don't know, I'm just not that intellectual when it comes to books and like reading between the lines, but I really did enjoy this. So the last book I read was Gone Girl by Gillian Flynn, and Gone Girl follows a woman, Amy, and her husband Nick, as Amy suddenly goes missing one morning, and the police investigation starts to turn on Nick. He becomes the prime suspect. I went to this book thinking that I knew the ending just based on hearing things when the film came out, but in reality what I thought was the ending actually happens less than halfway through the book, and the second half of the book just surprised me time after time. I loved it. At first I really hated both Nick and Amy, and I found it kind of hard to actually read the book because I hated them. I just thought they were the most annoying people ever. But as I went along, I went through a roller coaster. I would hate them, I would love them, I would hate them, I'd feel sorry for them, you know. They're such complex, dynamic characters. I just loved it. One thing I also really liked was their backgrounds. So Amy and Nick both have really interesting, unique backgrounds. I think they're some of the most unique backgrounds I've read about. And Amy's parents are authors who had a successful book series called Amazing Amy. And I don't want to say too much because it's a thriller, I don't want to give too much away. But this brings a lot of interesting plot points into the story. I don't want to say much more because obviously it is a thriller. I think you should go in as blind as possible. But I will say that Amy is one of the smartest characters I've ever read about, and by extension, the author is just so clever. The way she like ties up every little thread, she thinks of everything. I just loved it. I thought it was amazing. I actually might make a separate video talking about just Gone Girl because I think there's a lot more I wanted to say with spoilers. So that was all of the books I read in June. I had a very successful reading month. I loved pretty much every book I read, and I enjoyed being part of the readathon. I never got around to reading Vicious, the group book. Just, I don't know, I was going to have to get on my Kindle, and I'm not that into ebooks. Same for audiobooks. I've never listened to an audiobook. I just don't think I'd enjoy it. So I obviously could have got a lot more points for the group if I'd done these things, like especially audiobooks, but I don't know, it's just not what I'm into. If you've read any of these books, please let me know your thoughts down below in the comments. I'd love to hear them. And please leave a like and subscribe, and thank you for watching.